A Flash in the Dark, Chapter 4, Struck. Getaway car is a Mustang Shelby GT500. Shelbys have a rear super wide tire specific to that model, 12 inches with an asymmetrical tread. There's something else, too. Barry reached into her open case, pulling out a small plastic swab. She dipped it into the darker patch of the tire print and brought it close to her nose, pulling a face as she sniffed. Fecal excrement. Animal, I'd guess. She pulled an evidence bag out of her case and stuck the swab in it. Captain Singh nodded. Get that back to the lab ASAP, Allen. See if you can figure out where the Martin brothers are hiding out, he ordered. Barry nodded and stood. Joe put a hand on her shoulder. I'll give you a lift back to the precinct, he offered. Barry snapped her case shut with a grin and nodded, following Joe out of the crime scene as Shire, his partner, went back to canvassing witnesses. Once they were past the tape, Joe pulled Barry into a hug. It's so good to see you, kiddo. When Captain Singh said something had happened to you... Joe trailed off, holding Barry a little tighter. She hugged her foster father back just as tightly. I'm okay. Not a scratch on me. He didn't want to hurt me. He needed my help, Barry explained. Joe shook his head as he opened the car door for her. The point remains he kidnapped you. And you're sure you didn't see anything that could help Starling catch this psycho? Joe asked. Barry shook her head. No, he kept his hood up the whole time, and he was wearing a mask. That wasn't true, but Barry had left a specially made mask as a Christmas present for Oliver. But what Joe didn't know couldn't hurt anyone. Joe nodded and smiled over at her. I'm just glad you're okay, though. Iris is probably going to kill you, he warned. Barry laughed. Her foster sister had likely been going out of her mind with worry. You're just lucky she's working this morning, Joe pointed out. Barry nodded as they pulled into the lot at the back of the precinct. Barry had put the test in about 10 minutes ago, shortly after she'd arrived back at the precinct, and was straightening up her lab when Iris stormed in and punched her in the shoulder. Hard. Ow! What was that for? Barry demanded. Iris pulled her into a hug. Getting kidnapped! You had me so worried, Barry! She chastised. Barry smiled and hugged Iris back. I'm fine. The arrow didn't hurt me. He just needed some forensic help, and we happened to be working on the same case anyway. Barry twitched slightly. She hated lying to her sister, but it went unnoticed. Iris smiled at her before leaning around her and grabbing her carton of fries. Well, I'm glad you're okay and home in time to see this atom smasher smashing, she said around her stolen fry. Barry frowned and made a half-hearted attempt to snatch back her fries. Hands off my fries, Barry sighed as she checked the test. There was a murder today. I don't know if I'll be able to make it to Star Labs, she said, gesturing to the computer in front of her. Iris frowned, ignoring Barry's orders about her fries. But seeing this thing turn on is like your dream, your sad little nerdy dream. And no, I will not lay off your fries. I am stress eating over my dissertation. We started selling cronuts at Jitters. I ate 2 today. If I don't graduate soon, I'm going to be more muffin top than woman, she complained. Barry laughed. You will not. You look fantastic as usual, sis, Barry assured. Iris smiled, picking up Barry's latest copy of Science Weekly and asking about why the accelerator was so important. Barry did her best to explain, but Iris just shook her head. We need to get you laid, Iris lamented. Then the smile grew wider and more mischievous. I heard through the grapevine that you were at Oliver Queen's gala before the mess with the arrow. Barry blushed at the memory of Oliver's hand tangling in her hair as they kissed. She was saved from having to answer as Joe came in. Hey, leave her alone. She's working, Joe ordered. There was a beep, and Iris pointed at the computer, stealing another one of Barry's fries. Your test thingy's done, Iris pointed out. Barry sat down in front of the computer and set to work. 10 minutes later, she turned back to Joe and Iris, explaining her theory on where the Martin brothers were hiding out. Iris turned to her father. Since Barry solved your problem, how about letting her go to Star Labs? Iris asked. Joe rolled his eyes before nodding. Go, he said, waving the 2 of them off. Barry whooped and leapt from her chair, racing over to her purse, ignoring her suitcase that still sat innocently in the corner of her lab, a reminder that she hadn't been home since the day she left for Starling. Thank you so much, Joe, she called to Joe, who grinned and gestured them out of the door again. Iris grabbed Barry's hand and led her off to her car. Soon they were at Star Labs. Iris linked elbows with Barry. Don't think I forgot about what we were talking about before Dad interrupted us. Oliver Queen's gala. Spill, Iris demanded, as they joined the back of the crowd set to watch Harrison Wells' speech. Barry laughed and told Iris a slightly altered version of events, only leaving out anything about the arrow. She did, however, bring up Oliver's offer, a Spartan version of that conversation anyway, and, of course, their kiss. Iris literally squealed, making several people around them jump and stare at them disapprovingly. Oh my god! You kissed Oliver Queen? Iris fanned herself as she stared at her foster sister. I don't know if I should feel jealous or just happy for you. Seriously, in less than a week, you stole the heart of Starling City's most eligible bachelor? What's next, Bruce Wayne? I seriously underestimated your nerd allure, she said, playfully smacking Barry in the shoulder. Barry laughed and shushed Iris as Harrison Wells stepped up to the podium and began to speak. Though he seemed to scan the crowd a few times, Barry couldn't help but feel like he made eye contact with her several times throughout the short speech. Then someone slammed into Iris, snatching her bag as she dropped it. My bag! My laptop's in there with my dissertation! Iris cried out. Barry didn't hesitate, racing after the thief. She caught up to him at the restricted area fence, and he slammed Iris's bag into her face. Then, when she offered to let him go if he gave back the bag, he slammed it into her stomach, knocking her off her feet before he jumped the fence. Iris helped her up as she felt blood dripping down her face. Freeze! Or do you want to find out the hard way you're not faster than a bullet? Barry recognized the voice. A detective, likely assigned as extra security for the night, Eddie Thawne. Soon they were back at the precinct, giving their statements against the mugger as Barry tried to staunch the flow of blood from her nose. So, who is that, and why is he so happy? So he caught a mugger, Iris asked, as she handed Barry an ice pack for her nose, which luckily wasn't broken. Transfer from Keystone. Got here a few weeks ago. Eddie Thawne, Barry explained thickly, pinching her nose hard. Iris raised an eyebrow, looking back up at the blonde. Oh, so that's Detective Pretty Boy, Iris mused. Barry tried to stifle a laugh. Iris blushed slightly. That's what my dad calls him. Says he actually keeps score when it comes to arrests. He is pretty, though, she said, looking at him up and down with interest. Barry grinned as she took the Kleenex away from her nose, which had finally stopped bleeding. She checked the time on her phone. I gotta make a call. I'll be up in my lab, okay? Barry said, glancing over at where Thawne was processing the arrest. Iris nodded and patted her on the back. Barry called Felicity and grinned when the techie picked up. Hey, Felicity. Sorry I didn't get a chance to call earlier. She could hear the grin in Felicity's voice as she spoke. It's okay. Probably a busy day of dodging questions for you. Did you make it back in time to see the accelerator turn on? Felicity asked, sounding moderately jealous. Barry frowned lightly. I made it back in time, but the mugger tried to steal my sister's bag, so I missed the cutoff in line to actually see it turn on. Guess I'll just watch the news coverage. Also, I left a gift for Oliver on the computer desk. I wanted to make sure he got it, Barry said, grinning as she toyed with a pen on her desk. Felicity must have handed the phone off to Oliver, for he was the next voice she heard as she set her purse down in her lab and pulled out an article about the extraordinary break-in at Queen Consolidated. I did. It's perfect, Barry. Thank you. I'm sending you a little something, too. It'll be a few days before it gets there, but I think you'll like it, he said. She could hear the smile in his voice. Barry grinned as she turned on the coverage of the accelerator. Oh, really? Now I want to know what it is, but I won't ask. I want it to be a surprise. I gotta go, though. Stay safe, Oliver. You too, Barry, he said. She stepped over to the map of Central and frowned as her foot slipped slightly. She shook her head down at the damp floor. Someone had left the skylight open again. It's Central City. What's the worst that could happen? I'll call you later, okay? All right. Talk to you later, Barry. Talk to you later, Oliver. She hung up the phone and pinned up the article before turning back to the small TV and frowning. Something was going wrong with the accelerator. She looked out the window and saw a huge explosion plume up into the skyline before the power went out. She hurried over to the chain that closed the skylight. She pulled on the chain twice before everything seemed to slow down around her. Liquid was flying upward in slow motion. It was just like that night. Fear sparked up in her heart as she looked up. Then there was a flash of light, and she felt herself flying through the air as a scream that might have been hers echoed around her, and pain coursed through her. Then her back slammed into one of the shelves of chemicals, and her world went black.